Welcome. My name is Paul Natorp, and I have this great honor and pleasure to be the moderator and the host for this event today, which is a conference about Aarhus as a donut city. And donut economy presents a vision of what it means for humanity to thrive in the 21st century. And today, these hours is an open space for big conversations about reimagining and remaking the future of our city of Aarhus. And we have an amazing program today, and we have amazing people around us. And this day is possible because a group of people have put a lot of work over a long time in setting this up and making a lot of preparations. So this event is organized and is made possible by the Dougnut group in Aarhus, which consists of people from 5 different NGOs that decided to work together to look into the future in ways that can help Aarhus thrive, both for the people in Aarhus, but also be an example for other cities in the world. And I would like the people from the Dougnut group just to stand up so that you can see whose work actually made this possible. So we have a program today that you can say it consists of 3 different acts. First, we are so privileged that we're going to meet Kate Raboth, who is, I could say, the mother of donut economy. And we are also going to meet Rob Shorter from the Donut Economy Action Lab that is working with how to actually put these thoughts into action that can create a better future. And we're also going to hear from Marieke Vandonk, who is the vice mayor in Amsterdam, one major city that is already starting to, on a very concrete level, to use the ideas and the action framework of donut economy to integrate it into their planning. And hopefully we're also going to hear briefly from Copenhagen, from Fanny Broholm, who will share a short status from Copenhagen's work with the donut economy. That will be Act 1. Then we will have a short break of 10 minutes, 5 minutes actually. It's a very ambitious program here, so we will be very precise on time, and please help us to keep that through. After that, we are so lucky that we will have 1, 2, 3, 4, 5 coming councillors in the City Council of Aarhus with us, together with a representative from the Climate Secretariat, I think that's what it's called, that from the administration side is working with supporting climate strategies in the city. And that will be Act number 2. The third part of this program is, and also here we will have a dialogue in number 2, sort of the second part. That's where we can get a chance also to be part of a conversation, because there will not be much space for that in the first part when we listen to Kate and to Rob and to the Vice Mayor of Amsterdam. And then we will have sort of some time in the end to just recap, where we'll again meet Kate and Rob. And hopefully we will all leave with new ideas and new insights in our heads and some courage to act in our hearts. And this is just the beginning. So don't expect any conclusions and drawn up action plans. The ambition is to make this a beginning for an important conversation and important work that can take place in Aarhus, building on the phenomenal preparation that the Dougnut Group has done. So let's get started, and I would love to welcome Kate Raworth, the mother of Donut Economy, who will talk to us about what would it mean to actually work with Donut Economy here in Aarhus. So thank you for being with us, Kate. We have a brave technician in the corner working hard on getting your sound through, Kate.
Okay, thank you. Wonderful. Thank you so much. It's a real pleasure to join all of you in the room where you are together and everybody online to join this webinar and this conversation, as Paul just said, the ambition and the creativity and the possibilities for your city. So I'm going to kick off with a presentation about donut economics, and I invite you to listen to it through the lens of your city. I have to say, when I first wrote the book, Donut Economics, I never imagined that it would have this much traction. But the most valuable thing that's happened is that people actually want to put these ideas into practice, whether in education, in business, in community organizations, in municipalities. And so we created Donut Economics Action Lab to support this work. So we're thrilled that it's of interest to you. And we really look forward to seeing the ideas and the ambition that come out of this conversation you're having today. So let me share my screen and dive in. So what happens when Aarhus meets the donut? Oh. So let's recognize that the 21st century has begun with multiple crises. It's begun with financial meltdown, with climate and ecological breakdown, and with the realities of COVID lockdown. And these crises hit us internationally with huge inequalities of gender and race, of wealth and power, of global north and global south. They show us how deeply interconnected we are with each other and with the rest of the living world. And they emerge from the systems we've created. They emerge from systems that seek to grow endlessly. Financial crash comes out of a financial system built upon endless expansion. If we endlessly expand our use of Earth's fossil fuels and her resources, we will induce climate and ecological breakdown. And if we endlessly expand human settlements into wildlife areas, coupled with endless increase in global travel, we create perfect conditions for a health pandemic. So we need to transform our vision of the shape of progress. And for this, I offer you a donut. It is the only one that actually turns out to be any good for us. So you can imagine humanity's use of Earth's resources radiating out from the center of this picture. That means that the hole in the middle of the donut is a place where people are falling short on the essentials of life. It's where people do not have the resources they need for food, housing, healthcare, education, political voice, transport, income, gender and equality. So I crowdsourced these from the world's governments, from the Sustainable Development Goals. It means all the world's governments have already agreed, leave no one in the hole. But as we collectively use Earth's resources, we know that we start to put pressure on our planetary home. And so we must not go beyond that ecological ceiling. Otherwise, we create breakdown of Earth's life supporting systems. We create climate breakdown. We acidify the oceans, create a hole in the ozone layer. We break down the web of life in excessive use of water and of land and loss of biodiversity. These around the edge of the 9 planetary boundaries recognized by scientists just over a decade ago. So put them together, and the goal of the donut is to meet the needs of all people within the means of the living planet. And the shape of progress is suddenly no longer endless expansion, it is thriving in a dynamic balance. If that's the goal, we are very far from it right now, as all of the red in this picture shows. Billions of people worldwide are falling short on their most essential needs, and we are collectively overshooting multiple planetary boundaries. So to me, this is humanity's 21st century selfie. This is the story we must turn around. And last century's economic theories and governmental policies and business models and city strategies are not going to get us there because they weren't designed to solve for this. We need to come up with new theories and policies and strategies and business models of our own. So how do we do that? Let's recognize that this is the global donut. I want to bring it down to the national level. Here are just 4 national donuts. Malawi, you can see very significantly falling short on meeting people's needs, the red in the center, but not overshooting any of the planetary boundaries. At the other end of the scale, we've got Australia, still falling short on meeting some people's needs, but massively overshooting multiple planetary boundaries. And in the middle, I've got China, and today for your nation, Denmark, to show countries that are also between the two foundations. So Denmark is actually one of the few countries in the world which is almost meeting the social foundations on the global comparable scale. Of course, there is deprivation and inequality within your nation, but on the globally comparable scale, it's almost filling in that center blue, but has a very significant overshoot of planetary boundaries. If we put these 4 countries in a global diagram, the sweet spot is that top left-hand corner, where we meet the needs of all within the means of the planet. And there's the world's countries overshooting planetary boundaries, falling short on the social foundations. I've shown in red the 4 nations that I just highlighted. And the point is that every nation needs to transform its journey from where it is now to go towards the donut. It is an unprecedented journey for every nation, whether Malawi or indeed Denmark and Australia or China. We need to transform the direction of progress. And we need to recognize that though these countries stand as dots on the page, they are profoundly interconnected through histories of colonialism, through military power, through trade and finance rules, through ongoing resource extraction and land grabs, and through the current and future impacts of climate change. So we need to transform within and between all nations. How do we start to do that? I think we can start by recognizing that we need to transform the fundamental dynamics of our economies. 2 big dynamics. The first is that we've inherited degenerative industrial designs that are linear. We take Earth's materials, make them into stuff we want, use it for a while, and throw it away. And this is what is pushing us over planetary boundaries, running down the life support systems of planet Earth. We need to bend those arrows around into a circular or cyclical economy where resources aren't used up, they're used again and again, far more carefully, collectively, creatively, and slowly, so that we work with and within the cycles of the living world to become regenerative by design. For examples from cities around the world, Oslo has gone car-free in the city center, massively reducing its ecological impact on climate change, making transport accessible to all but low carbon. Amsterdam has adopted a strong policy of circular economy, and construction must become 50% circular by 2030. And already some districts like this experimental district, everything there that is built must be built to be circular. But also on the ecological side, there's regenerative design, recognizing that water is part of many cities' future. So rather than trying to hold it out by concrete, welcoming it in the concept of a sponge city, as here in Kunli in China, or in the city of Medellin in Colombia, the river used to be treated as a handy industrial sewer, carrying away the toxins. And then they realized that the river is life. And they opened up parks around the river and brought humanity and life back to the ecosystem of this city. So regenerative by design. But we must add to this, recognizing that we have often inherited cities and places that are divisive by design, that capture opportunity and value in the hands of a few, whether through infrastructure, whether through laws and regulations, or whether through practice. And we can create economies that are far more distributive by design, sharing value and opportunity with all who co-create it. And that turns out to be the whole of society. Some examples: community wealth building. Cities like Preston in the UK a relatively low income and depressed area realized that nobody was coming from outside to save them, and that they would have to use their own powers of procurement to rebuild the local economy, purchasing locally for schools, hospitals, the local government, universities, buying from the local suppliers to build up that local supply and keep wealth within the region. Vienna, over 60% of people in that city live in socially owned housing that's owned by the city or city-run cooperatives. It's central, it's affordable, it's high quality, and it's normal. And it transforms the norm of living in social housing. Cities like Stockton in California have been watched by the world because they trialed a guaranteed basic income scheme, giving around $500 per month guaranteed to some of the lowest income households. They saw it had a huge impact on enabling those people to get out of long-term unemployment and into work. So how can cities experiment and find ways to alleviate that poverty trap that we know exists everywhere? And then a very practical example from Bogota in Colombia. Why give public space to cars just to fill it like a car park when it could be a people's park? Turning spaces into places for community to meet people like themselves and people not like themselves, and to say, this is why I live here. So degenerative to regenerative, divisive to distributive. I want to bring this now to a tool we've created and that we're very soon to launch and share with cities like yourself, and ask, can our city live within the donut? What would that actually mean to try to do that? And I invite you to listen to everything I'm about to share through the lens of your city. So we can unroll the donut, opening up that space. And if we do that, we create a space between the social foundation and the ecological ceiling where we can envision a future we want and use this as a storyboard for bringing new possibilities and imagining and co-creating. So let's dive in. If we're going in for a city donut, here's the question we invite every ambitious 21st century city to ask itself. How can our city become a home to thriving people in a thriving place while respecting the well-being of all people and the health of the whole planet? Now that can be broken into 4 questions that we call the 4 lenses of creating a city portrait. And we begin with the question, how can all of the people of our city thrive? The local social question that many cities focus on almost exclusively on this. Let's add to it the local ecological question. How can our city be as generous as the wildland next door? I'll say in a moment more about what this actually means. These are the local aspirations of a place, to be a thriving society in a thriving ecological place. But we must recognize that every place is deeply connected to the world and therefore must take a global responsibility for its impacts. So we add 2 more lenses. How can our city respect the health of the whole planet? And how can our city respect the well-being of people worldwide? Let me take you in one by one to these lenses so you can see what sits inside them. So how can all the people of our city thrive? And along the bottom, you can see all the dimensions that we invite cities to assess how they are doing. Of course, you can add other ones and make it your own. But how are people doing in terms of food, water, housing, healthcare, education, connectivity, culture, belonging, community? Some examples of questions. What does thriving mean to people here? What does it mean to thrive in Aarhus? That would be different from the answer in Amsterdam or the answer in Dar es Salaam. What have we learned about COVID? What's it made visible here that was always here but hidden? And how can we then act on what we now know in terms of ensuring everybody can thrive? And what aspect of our culture in our city will turn out to be our greatest strength? What can we use to pivot from the inheritance we've received to the future we want to create using those strengths? So that's the local social. Let's bring to it the question of how can our city be as generous as the wildland next door? Because every city is located in a unique place on this planet. Up a mountain, in a valley, in a plateau, in a desert, the savanna, tropics, the drylands. Nature has a genius of thriving everywhere. Nature has figured out in each place how to cleanse the air and house biodiversity, how to store carbon, cycle water, harvest energy, regulate the temperature, build and protect soil. So we invite every city to say, what's the generosity of the wildland next door to where we are if we were now all together in Aarhus, where would you take us to say this is the wild land of our place? And we could measure nature there. How is she sequestering carbon and storing groundwater and housing biodiversity? And what if that became the standard, the target that your city aimed to match or exceed? So, for example, how could the city store as much carbon as the wildland next door? How could the city manage water and welcome wildlife as the wildland next door? So the city starts to belong in the ecosystem of which it is a part. This comes from the biomimicry thinker Janine Benyus, and it's wildly ambitious, but utterly natural. So these are the local aspirations. Now let's think about the global context. How can a city respect the health of the whole planet? And let's start by recognizing here's Denmark's ecological overshoot. If Denmark is in overshoot, Aarhus is in overshoot. So like all cities and places in the global north, there's an immediate challenge and a responsibility to come back within planetary boundaries on climate, on land, on fertilizer use, on our material footprints worldwide. How can that be done? How do we reverse this ecological overshoot? There are some major sectors, of course, where this can happen. For example, in transforming mobility. What's already happening? What more could happen? In creating a circular economy. In some sectors, such as food systems, I'm sure there are many, many initiatives already underway in your city to tackle these issues and to bring yourselves back within these planetary boundaries. And there are many more possibilities and further to go, as every global north city faces. This is because your city is connected to the whole planet through global supply chains, bringing in food and clothing, electronics, consumer goods, construction materials. So that's the global material and ecological footprint of a place. We take that into account. Now, still thinking of those global supply chains, let's lastly think of the people in those global supply chains and how the city can respect the well-being of those people. So we can ask, for example, which brands and retailers are on sale in the city? Which corporate headquarters are located in the city? And how have they constructed their global supply chains? Which countries do they touch? Who is making the clothes you're buying, assembling the electronics, creating the construction materials that build your homes and offices? Think also of the city's procurement practices. How does the city purchase? It may well have a sustainability criterion. Does it have a social criterion? And how can that be put into practice? Because we know that the labor behind the label is often not nearly as pretty as the brand on the box. And this is a concern through global supply chains for consumer goods, but also for city procurement. What can we do to ensure that we are respecting the rights of people worldwide in the way that we furnish our own wants and needs in our cities? So pulling out, we can put the four lenses together and you can see they connect and there's a beautiful space for co-creation in the middle. So we can use this, for example, to bring a theme. Let's say you wanted to talk about your city's housing future. Then you could ask across these four lenses in a holistic way, how would we increase the housing available in our city in a way that enables everybody to thrive? How can that housing be affordable? How can it be friendly to families and building communities? How can that housing bring back in wildlife? How can it sequester carbon? How can it store the rainwater? How can we make housing that actually helps us belong in this ecosystem? How can we build housing that actually reduces the new materials that we use, reduces the carbon emissions that are heavily associated with construction? Can we create circular buildings where materials are used again and again? How can we reduce our carbon footprints? And how can we respect the rights of workers who are employed throughout those global supply chains? Now, of course, these are not easy questions, but they're always there whether we ask them or not. So let's ask them, let's look at them collectively. And then, for example, ask ourselves, what targets does your city already have that are associated with the goal of housing? And what indicators exist about how well that's going? What's already in motion? Let's celebrate the action that's already underway, and there are everywhere, actions and initiatives that are already bringing about the future that we want. What are the key challenges? What's stopping us? What's getting in our way? And what new initiatives might we want to come up with that could actually start driving this forward? And lastly, of course, how is everything interconnected? One of the goals of this framework is to enable that holistic interconnection to be visible. Now, I should say the obvious thing, that the donut framework does not give you the answers. Thank goodness, because the answers come from yourselves. So it creates a scaffolding, it creates a space in which you can generate your own answers to solving a housing challenge or any other challenge for the city. It invites you to look at it holistically through these 4 lenses. And so it gives voice to many, many different players in the city. We held workshops using these tools in late 2019. You can see this was pre-COVID, in Portland, in Philadelphia, and in Amsterdam. These are city policymakers and members of the community working around their city portraits, starting to do this kind of holistic thinking. And the main message that came out was the relief they felt to connect, to share, to step out of the silos that they are put in by their job, and to see the interconnections between things and start to make more holistic policy. This work, of course, was stopped in some places because of COVID, but the city of Amsterdam said, no, we really want to use this framework to launch our commitment to creating a circular economy here. And so they launched it in April 2020. It was actually in the height of the city's COVID crisis. And the photograph you see below is that at the same time, there was the creation of the Amsterdam Donut Coalition, one of the first donut action networks to be created. Change makers across the city, whether they worked in education or entrepreneurship or civic networks, neighborhood communities, the government, they came together and said, we're going to create the Amsterdam Donut Coalition because we're mutually committed to bringing these ideas about. And so when this work was launched, we at Donut Economics Action Lab very quickly wrote up the methodology of how we did this city portrait, how we created it with the city of Amsterdam so that everybody could have access to it. And within months, many cities and places and nations from global north and global south were saying, we're going to do this here, we're adopting this, whether they were municipalities and the government officials, or whether they were community organizations saying, we want to initiate this. So we're very excited, inspired ourselves by the power of peer-to-peer inspiration. We know that the most inspiring words and examples come from people just like yourselves who are doing that thing that otherwise seemed impossible. So we're really looking forward to hearing what it could look like in your city. And I'm going to hand over to Rob in a moment to share some examples of other places that have taken inspiration from Amsterdam and started to put this into practice. I'll stop here and just really look forward to the rest of the conversation. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Kate, for taking us through this framework in a very sort of condensed, but I think also very informative way that can prepare us to actually start moving in that direction. And now we're going to meet Rob Shorter from the Donut Economy Action Lab, and Rob will take us through a couple of examples of locally led initiatives from different places around the world. So please welcome Rob Shorter from the Donut Economy Action Lab.
Hello, thank you very much. It's wonderful to be here, wonderful to be in this mixed audience of some online, some in person. And so, yes, I'm going to share a few examples of these ideas in practice. So a place that I'd love to start is with this picture here of all of the amazing interpretations of the donut in lots of different places. And what it reveals to me is that the donut is got two really interesting qualities. One's it's holistic. Yes, it brings together social and ecological dimensions to allow us to think holistically, but it's also really inviting. It's inviting both of our creativity, which is an abundance in this picture here, but also it's really inviting to people who don't usually think about economics as something for them. We know that people can be scared by the word economics, but no one's scared of donuts. And so when you make something as inviting as this, you increase the number of people who are engaging in the conversation. And when you have that wider audience, a part of that conversation, exciting things start to happen. And so we created the Donut Economics Action Lab to be a place for these people to meet, the people who aren't waiting for permission to put these ideas into practice, from communities to cities to classrooms to boardrooms. And these are people who are taking ideas and putting them into practice in a unique context with their own creativity and ideas and imagination, and sharing back the innovations with the community, so that we're building a commons of knowledge and practice that's inspiring others. And it's that peer-to-peer inspiration that we're really seeing catalyzing the increased use of these ideas in many different places. And Kate mentioned the Amsterdam city portrait and the four lens methodology. And Amsterdam pioneered the use of this methodology, and with a very bold city target of becoming a circular city, 100% circular by 2050. And after I speak, we'll hear from Marieke Vandonk, Vice Mayor of Amsterdam, to share more about that story, about how they found this process. But in that true nature of peer-to-peer inspiration, where Kate was sharing, we launched the portrait and had so many expressions of interest to do a similar thing in places around the world. One of those places was Brussels, the Brussels capital region, initiated by the Secretary of State for Economic Transition. The organization Confluences led this incredible process of taking the four lens methodology to four different scales, from the macro scale of the whole region down to the nano scale, which we can see here as an example of analyzing the impact of using smartphones across the four lenses, how it's meeting our needs locally, but how it also affects the well-being of people worldwide and the health of the whole planet. And so this is another innovation using the same methodology. It's an innovation that's been initiated by the city, as with Amsterdam, but we're also seeing people come to these ideas from a grassroots perspective, self-organizing around the ideas. And similarly, Amsterdam pioneered this too. So in December of 2019, the Amsterdam Doughnut Coalition formed as a group of change makers from across the city, from many different disciplines, the people who just weren't going to wait for someone to give them permission to start. And they inspired so many more groups to organize around the ideas of donut economics across their place. This is from communities all the way up to nations. IDEN, the bottom left there, standing for the Irish Donut Economics Network. And we weren't intending for people to form groups like this when we started, but we went with this energy, and we've been working with over 25 groups around the world, understand what is it to organize at a local level around these ideas? What are the common challenges we're facing? What are the common insights we're coming up with? And how can we share the learnings of what's working? And it's been a wonderful process to meet and work with the people pioneering this work. And we've created a term, Doughnut Action Networks, to sort of hold space for what this form of organizing is. Self-organizing, open to membership, part of the community that are all working with these ideas, non-commercial, not-for-profit, and recognizing that it's a part of a wider movement for economic transformation. You don't have to be just using the donut to do this work and be called something donut. Regen Melbourne is a wonderful example of this. Regen Melbourne have got a vision to moving towards a regenerative Melbourne, a community initiated, an initiative, bringing together lots of organizations across the city to create a wonderful, thriving network that have come up with this vision of what it means to be a thriving Melbourne. And they've been looking not only at what they're looking to create, but very much how they create it. And the how is just, I think, is evidence in the word towards. And it's that process they put so much effort into. Starting in October 2020, they went through an engagement phase with 5 community workshops when they invited people from across the city to bring their voice to what it means to be a thriving Melbourne in a thriving place. They've done that first phase, and now they'll be moving on to look at the other two lenses Kate described of what does it mean for Melbourne to do that whilst respecting the well-being of all people and the health of the whole planet. So they had the community engagement phase, but they also had leadership interviews with people across sectors, and then had some industry round tables for feedback before they launched in April this year. They have done this in engagement with the city as well. So this is a grassroots-led initiative that is now working with the Mayor's office. So it just really shows how many people can come together. It's not just a top-down initiative, not just a bottom-up self-organizing, but there are ways to form that joint approach. And so here's just an example of the method. There's a Miro board where they've invited community members to bring all their creativity and imagination, lived experience and voice to all these questions. And there's so much detail and ideas held on these boards, but they distilled it into these beautiful visions, with one of each of these for the social lens, this one being on what it means to be an empowered Melbourne. And it's really, Kate mentioned how the four lens creates a space for sharing our experiences, sharing our challenges, sharing what inspires us. But it's really when we invite all the voices that we make visible the reality of a place, make visible the challenges that we're going to have to work through. And if we don't invite all of the voices, we'll have all these blind spots. So a real question then is, how do we create the methods really to welcome, to invite everyone's voice to be a part of this process? And what's great about what Regen Melbourne did is that they are inspiring the rest of Australia. Regen Sydney have recently launched. And just today, I was speaking with Newcastle in Australia and Brisbane organising too. So just 2 weeks ago, they had their very first Australia-wide meeting. So beginning to create a network of networks across the country. So this is an online workshop. And creating creative ways to engage online has been the theme of the last 18 months as we've been in lockdown. But what does it mean to do this work in real life, or IRL, as I'm now learning, is a common way of describing. And for that, I just take so much inspiration from an organization in Birmingham called Civic Square, where they are recognizing that the donor offers that opportunity to engage people in conversation in a way that you might not through the traditional economics approaches. And you can see lots of creative methods here underway. And I'm just going to read a quote from Imi Kaur, who is one of the instigators and leaders of this work. She says, "We wanted to build momentum, legitimately listening to people from the ground up. So we used lots of things that were nothing to do with the donut, just to engage, to talk, to build trust, to find different ways and engage. Every single time we designed something to say, make it circular in any way. So if there's a moment, you can bring up a conversation, not forcing the idea onto people. So you're building trust, deep, thick networks that will go a long way, and hopefully in the next 10 or 20 years, create something incredible." So these are the starts of those conversations to engage that wider audience. But it's not just engaging them in those surface level conversations about what the donut is, it's going deeper as well. And they've created this incredible donut monument, as they describe it, out of an open source design that will soon be available on the Deal platform, where it's just a place to start talking about the ideas in the book. And they're going to be hosting a book club. And a few months ago, the Deal community came together to co-create a book club guide. The idea being that a group of people who want to go deeper into the ideas can then week by week take chapter by chapter the ideas and apply them to their place and recognize what does it mean to bring our local context to these ideas and how do we relate to them through our lived experience. And what we're doing there is we're going beyond the donut into what it is we're designing in a regenerative and distributive economy. And then going even a step further to say, and how do we design those in ways that the deep design of our organizations are pointing in the same way as the donut? What are the sources of finance, government, ownership, and things like that? So these are some of the wonderful methods that we're seeing occur within the community. But I'm just going to cycle back before I finish and end with Amsterdam before I hand it over to Marieke, to say that they have now gone through a year or so since they published the portrait. And now they're meeting again in a few weeks' time to discuss what next. There's been so many amazing initiatives that have been created by changemakers across the city. So the question is, how can we all collaborate, work together as a network of changemakers from small businesses, communities in the commons, large businesses, the government and universities, to find not only the common story, but the common pathway towards the donut vision that we've all collectively signed up to. It's a cycle of co-creation, taking the city portrait, recognize what's the action we've done in the last year or so meant, and how can we enhance that, become even more ambitious? How do we look at the interconnections between all the initiatives? How do we connect the people? How do we look at the deep design of the initiatives to make them even more powerful? How do we find the new possibilities, the new collective stories of action we can all get behind? And not just get behind, but see our role in bringing about as well, so we can all recognize that we have a contribution from whichever organization we might be a part of. So these ideas and these stories and these tools for action are all on the Donut Economics Action Lab website. Here's a snapshot. And we cover the areas of communities, cities, education, business, and government. And you can go on there and explore, and soon we'll be having profile pages for all of these donut action networks. And so, yeah, finding the stories and tools, excuse me, and you can create events as well to organize with other people. So I'm going to finish there. And yeah, just really wonderful to share these ideas with you. And I look forward to seeing how your group come up with your unique methods of applying these ideas too. Thank you.
Well, thank you so much, Rob, for sharing these examples from all around the world that I think are really inspiring to give an image of how it is actually possible to work with donut economy in our own city. We're now going to meet Marieke Vandonk, who is the Vice Mayor of Amsterdam, and she will take us through the experience from Amsterdam of working with donut economics. And Marieke is not with us live. She's on a recorded talk, but I think she will explain it in a good way anyway. So just welcome her and let's give her a hand, even though she's not with us right now.
So we are very happy that we now can give the floor to Marieke Vandonk, who is alderman for the city of Amsterdam, and who will explain us how they are implementing and using this bright concept of the donut economy. Marieke, you have the floor.
Thank you very much, Dirk. And yes, you've all seen the beautiful city of Amsterdam, and you didn't hear, it wasn't my voice, but somebody's voice telling you what our ideas are to become a circular city by 2050. But even more, not only, it's not that we want to, but how do we want to become a circular city by 2050? And I think you have, yeah, I don't think that's the first slide. Yes, that's the first slide. I only have a few slides, so it's more like that you don't have to see my face all the time on your computer. So it's just to give a few images. Thank you so much for inviting me and telling a little bit about our journey in the donut. Because it is an exciting journey, I can tell you, at the moment in the midst of a crisis, or we thought it was the midst of the crisis, it was only the beginning of the crisis, that we as Amsterdam launched our idea to become a circular city, and by using the donut in order to become a circular city. And it was in April, and it was just 1 month after the whole world went into lockdown and was... I'm sorry, it was my cat. That the world was in crisis, and we were thinking, do we have to launch a circular strategy at this moment? And but then we thought we should, because we know from crises that it's the best moment to make a change. And we saw in this crisis how much other crises were also, Kate was already saying that, how much it was connected to the other crises that we were facing as a world. And we also knew that change was needed. And maybe in the darkest hour, it's the best to see a light. And we thought that by presenting the circular economy, and especially by doing it through the donut economy and through the donut theories, that would give some hope of change that we were all longing for. And we knew that climate crisis was even a much bigger crisis than COVID is. It's hard to imagine, but it is such a bigger crisis. So we thought, yeah, let's launch it. And well, Kate and I have ever since been on several moments together explaining why we launched it. And it was to give hope, and it was to show that if you want to make change, you have to do it at the moment when the crisis is the deepest. And only by launching this new strategy, it already makes a discussion starting. It already makes that people start thinking about it. And I think that's the beginning of the change, by talking to others, by exchanging ideas. So why does Amsterdam want to become a circular city and a climate neutral city? It's because our city is putting, as Kate was already saying, a lot of CO2 emissions into the air, and we're putting a lot of waste into the world, because we are a very rich city that is using a lot of materials, that is using a lot of fossil fuels, and we know we have to change that. So as a city, we have set very ambitious goals to become climate neutral. Also by 2050, we want to be climate neutral, and by 2030, we want to reduce our emissions by 55%. And we already had our circular ambitions for quite some time. And as you see, a lot of work needs to be done. But when I started in this work, I also noticed that a lot of people see the energy transition, but also the transition into a circular economy, as a very technical thing. So we exchange one fuel for the other one. Oh, so we don't drive a normal car anymore, we drive a Tesla. And for one thing, I don't think that we can make the big change in becoming a circular world and a climate neutral world without actually challenging the system that we're living in, because it's the system itself that makes us a city that pollutes so much. So by just changing one fuel for the other, one material from the other, is not going to make that structural change that we actually need. And also the other things that was worrying me very much, that all these nice little circular things and nice little climate neutral things are extremely expensive. You know, not everybody can afford a Tesla. And even if we can do that in this rich part of the world, it still doesn't support people in other parts of the world that don't have all these facilities. So we know we need to do it in a different way. And I hope there's a lot of young people here watching, but maybe also some of my generation. But I was brought up with Thatcher. I was brought up with Reagan. I was brought up in the doctrine that there is no alternative to the economics that were, you know, starting at that moment. And when I read The Donut Economy by Kate, and it was just a few months before I met her in the first time, it was my moment that I thought there is an alternative. And I think if you really want to have a system change, that means that you have to look for the alternative. And I do believe that the donut theory gives us the alternative, but it also gives us the challenge that we also have to invent it ourselves, or to work with it ourselves. The theory is beautiful, but we have to put it into practice, and Kate gives us the instruments, but we as cities have to do it. And that's a great journey. That's why we call the presentation The Journey with the Donut, because it's not there yet. We are working on it. And so yes, we want to have a fully circular city by 2050, but we want to do that in a way that we're actually not overshooting the planet's boundaries, and that we have a social foundation. So we started to work together, and I was happy when I started as an elder person that the city was already working with Kate. So I was in a beautiful position to make that happen even more. So we have to look at how can we make strategies that we actually bring those two together, and how can we make sure that our ambitions to become climate neutral and our ambitions become circular do not only interfere with our social ambitions to become a just city, but actually work together. And therefore we asked Kate, so what is our situation right now? Where are we if we're looking at Amsterdam? How are we doing? What is our city portrait? And so City took a picture. She took a picture of Amsterdam and showed us exactly what our overshoot is and where we fall short on a social level. Can I have the next slide, please? So the City Donut looked at different ways. It looked at our social foundations, if it's working or not, but not only for the people in Amsterdam, but also of the people worldwide, and how we are doing on that thing. Also on the ecological. So what would it mean for Amsterdam to thrive within a natural habitat, but also what would it mean for the health of the whole planet? And the donut showed us some spectacular things, because yes, we are doing well on a social level. Of course, we are a very rich nation. But if you look closely, we might also not work that well. Because one of the things, for example, if you measure the GDP of a country, you take the price of housing to see if a city is rich or not. And then by the means of the housing, the prices of houses in Amsterdam is extremely rich, but we're extremely poor because we can't house our people. Our housing is so expensive that many people can't live in Amsterdam because they can't afford it. Then you're not a thriving city. Then indeed you are a poor city if you're only opening your doors to the rich people. And we don't do that by purpose, but our policies work out that way. The other thing is on a social level, which is also, I think, something that happens in a bigger city, is that there's more people dealing with loneliness. There's more people dealing with depression because they are socially isolated. And I think those are big lessons that we never thought of. And actually the donut showed us that it's part of it. And then of course, we don't even have to talk about what the effects of the way Amsterdam is living is on people worldwide, because of all the consumer goods that we know are produced under very bad labor conditions. We know it. And the donut shows us. The donut shows us that we have a port that has a lot of storage for cacao, for chocolate, the chocolate beans. And we know that there's a lot of labor exploitation going on in that industry. So it's things that we know, but the City Donut showed us very much. And it also showed us that we are doing quite okay with or better than before with the pollution in the air, because we have less cars now in Amsterdam, but not good. We're doing okay with our own waters, but we're doing bad on CO2 emissions, and we're doing bad on what it means in other parts of the world. And this mirror is quite confrontational, because it really shows our input. It really shows our footprint in the world, and it shows also that we have to start make changes. And so we decided to do that. So we set up a strategy that is very much focused on how can we do the two things together. So how can we, for example, look at the fact that we need more housing in Amsterdam. We need to build more houses, and at the same time do that in a way that we don't overshoot all the planetary boundaries. So we're looking much more now at working with wood. And if we do that as the city, we also support those ecological farms that actually make that make, you know, wood that is okay, and we can support that. And so the other thing is that for the building world, we put high regulations on how they're using their materials, or how they deconstruct their buildings in order to reuse those materials. And also we put high regulations on the CO2 emissions of a building itself. So not only while you are building it, but also on the building. And the funny thing is that a lot of people always say, "Oh, you can't put those regulations on those companies because then they will go somewhere else, or then they don't want to do it." And the funny thing is, once you have your regulations and you put them for everybody, so it's a level playing field, and you show the companies that this is a policy that is here to stay, that we won't change it from day to day, then everybody's quite okay with it. And when I have my talks with the people who build the building constructions in our city, a lot of people are extremely proud, because it's also a little bit, you know, interesting to be the most innovative company in Amsterdam or in Netherlands, that you do this, that you start doing new things. So regulation, if you're clear, if you're straight about your regulation, most companies don't mind that much, as long as there is a playing field. So that's one of the things there that we're working on. The other thing that we're working on is very much on consumer goods. Consumer goods, we all know that they have a high impact on both the social conditions in other parts of the world, by bad labor conditions, but also on the waste that we're producing. So one of the things that we did is that textiles are one of the consumer goods that are extremely dirty while making. We made a denim deal with a lot of companies and say, okay, within a few years, we want to have at least 20% of all denim being used by circular textiles. And by having such a big coalition of people working on denim in Amsterdam, it's a denim capital, everybody is working with us. So we are working with a recovery center for clothing and the clothing brands in order to make sure that we can actually make this happen. So we can extend also the life of clothing, and we do that in the whole region of Amsterdam. So not only in the city, but we also have we work together with other cities in the surroundings, and we're together lobbying towards the Dutch government and the EU to have more producer responsibility when it comes to preventing textile waste and to make longer use. So we put it into practice and combine that with our lobby efforts to other worlds. As Kate was already saying, we are also very much working on how we are doing our commissioning and our purchasing. So as a city, we said we want to be, as a municipality, 100% circularity by 2030, but we also want to reduce our own consumption. And of course, we all know that the circular economy starts with refuse and reduce. So we also want to give the good example by doing it. And at the same time, when we purchase our services and products, you know, we have a big impact. And if we do that all in a circular way, that has a big impact also on innovative businesses that have a bigger market. So I also think that as a city, if you give a good example, you're not only giving a good example, at the same time, you're also making sure that businesses who want to do good in a circular way have also more clients. And we also do that together with regional partners. And one of the things is that we also make handbooks on how do you do circular procurements and commissioning, because it also asks for some different skills. So it's not only by doing it, but it's also taking others along and showing how to do that. So there's quite some products that or projects that we're working on, from collecting old paint and making that into new to textiles, to very short, very small projects where there is a group of women in the southeast part of Amsterdam, which is a poor area, and they are working together and sewing curtains for people in houses that are badly isolated. And so the women have a job by sewing those curtains, and the people have good curtains that will isolate their houses better, so they can have that in there. They have a energy bill. So sometimes these very small projects can be extremely, you know, they can have this social impact, but also can be something that you say, oh, I can do a donut thing within my own community. I can do it with my neighbors. I can do it on a low level. The other thing is that we work very much with repair cafes, making sure that people don't throw away stuff that can actually be repaired. And there we also need, again, our government. I think there is that we need to be much stricter towards producers and saying that you can't produce goods anymore that can't be repaired. A lot of people don't want to buy all this stuff, but you have to, because once it's broken, it can't be mended, and you need to have that. So that is one of our biggest lobby things that we do. I think the other one, and I'm glad we're in an international setting right now, and close to Brussels, where we need Brussels. I think in order to become really a circular economy, we have to completely change the tax regime that we have, because we need to go from low taxes on labor and high taxes on raw materials, because that would also, you know, make the circular economy thriving. And especially in these days, when we know that a lot of people will become out of job or already jobless, if we start a new economy that is using used materials, we can have, you know, startups with people who can think about how can you actually make things that can be, you know, completely taken apart again, but also actually the people who are doing it. So from very technical jobs to very practical jobs is something that the circular economy is about. And I think we need to do that. What we need to have this change that actually, because right now these companies who are working circular, it's so hard for them to actually make it work, because still labor is so expensive and raw materials are still too cheap. So that's my plea, that we absolutely change this, because otherwise it won't work. I did forget to ask for the next slides, because I think the next slide is about the projects that we're making. So this is how we're working. We have a city donut, we have our strategy. Right now we are working in a 2-year innovation and implementation program, and then we monitor our circular economy, because Kate made our portrait, but that needs to be a mirror. So we have to look in the mirror all the time, and in 2 years' time, Kate will come back and confront us how we have been doing. And that's, you know, that's quite exciting for us, because all the time you have to see, is it working? And then we can change things, or, you know, put in more effort to actually do that. So the city portrait is not only a portrait, it's a mirror, it's a monitoring instrument, and it's also something that gives you an appetite to do more. Maybe for the last slide, and then I'll stop. Those are some of the projects. We also tried to put in some of the first few things that we did when COVID hit the city, was to look at what can we do right now. And so these are, the picture is about very clever people working in restaurants and making this. But what we did as a city was a project which was called Everybody Connected. And we collected old laptops and devices. We refurbished them with a special company who does that. And we gave those laptops and devices to poor people who were in a situation of isolation, so they could still talk to old people could still talk to their grandchildren with these devices. And it was a small project, but it was also something that as a city we saw, we have a donut, we have a small donut, we did it in 1 month, and actually we could do something when we felt as a city so empty-handed with people with so many problems. So even the small things can make big impact. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Marieke, even though you can't hear us. We were supposed now to meet Fanny Broholm from Copenhagen on a connection from Costa Rica, but somehow she disappeared for us. She's apparently in the jungle with no connection. So we'll skip that part of the program and instead we'll start the break. And please notice on your tables, you have some material that you might want to look into. First of all, there's like a city portrait. I don't know if you noticed that Kate mentioned a couple of times and the other speakers about that they make city portraits, which is like a snapshot of the city. And this is a sort of a short resume of a portrait that was made by the Donut Group here in Aarhus. You can find the full material if you want. Also, there's a copy of Folkeavisen that has just been released, and it's a newspaper that is made with a lot of suggestions for solutions for how to solve the challenges that we have relating to climate change, climate crisis. It's made by the Fælles Bedste. And also there's a little leaflet from Mellemfolk i Samvirke about climate justice days that are happening right now, where there are lots of other events. But let's have a break until 15 minutes past 5, so that's 8 minutes, enough for a cigarette or some coffee, whatever you prefer. But be precise, be back here at 5:15. We're ready now for the second part of this meeting, where we're so privileged to have with us actually a full row of local politicians who I am convinced after the next elections all will be in the city council, and we will have 25 minutes for a dialogue. We have heard a lot about donut economy, the model, both from Kate Raworth. We have heard about how in the Donut Economy Action Lab, different places are working with using the donut economic model to create systemic change. And now's the time to have a dialogue with our local politicians to hear how these ideas and these frameworks can be used and make sense in a local context. And we will continue in English, not because I think most people here would maybe be more comfortable with Danish, but we still have Kate and Rob with us, and they will return in just a little while. So in order to not to exclude them, we will continue in English. We are about 100 people here, and we are about 30 people following this conference on Zoom. And after a short round, it will be a possibility to ask questions so that we can have a dialogue here. Unfortunately, we will not be able to take questions from the people following us on Zoom. Please forgive us. We know you're there, and we are with you. But let's start. Maybe I just want to introduce briefly. So we have here with us, we have Mathilde Bressum from Venstre, Sander Jensen, SF, Therese Blevad, Konservative Folkeparti, Ture Hastrup from Enhedslisten, Esben Kullberg, Socialdemokratiet, and then we also have Metin Lindved Ejdin, Radikale Venstre. And I would like to start by giving you all 1 minute to just 1 minute. And I'll set my timer here, so you'll have a gentle clock when 1 minute is over, then at least you know you're over time. And just to maybe share with us a few thoughts about how do you think, maybe let me start in a different way. We just heard the vice mayor from Amsterdam telling about when they started working with the donut economic model, that it was first a source of hope. That was the first impact, that actually change is possible. And then it was a tool to start a citywide conversation that engaged the whole city and not just experts in an office. And then it was actually a concrete way of making a structural change by combining and bringing all these different efforts together in one vision. So that was her take on how this can be used in Amsterdam. And I would like to maybe hear your thoughts, initial thoughts in 1 minute about how do you think, what kind of role can donut economics play in the context of Aarhus? And Mathilde, please begin.
It's on.
Yes,
Great.
perfect.
Thank you so much for having me. I think it's truly inspiring to be here, and I was actually kind of touched and inspired by hearing all the different presentation, especially from the vice president or the vice mayor in Amsterdam. I think that this is a great way to start a conversation about climate change, because I think we need to change the structure of how we think sustainability and climate development in our city as well. I think it's great how the sustainable development goals has trying to come into a kind of a compact and easy understandable graphic model that doesn't talk about growth, because growth can be such a polarization issue, which I think it's better that it leaves room for local autonomy and also political autonomy and local innovation. So I'm just pleased to be here, and I have open mind and eager to learn about more, and looking forward to a pleasant debate.
Wow, and thank you for very precisely modeling the 1 minute, Mathilde. And it's over to Sander.
Yeah. I'll stand up so I can see everybody. First, I would like to thank Kate for a model that is very inspiring and usable and very well communicated. It's easy to understand, and I also think it is easy to work with in Aarhus on many levels. It is good as a tool to be inspired, not only here in the municipality, but also in the rest of the city. It is just so important for us to underline that although it's a good model, it has to bring about change. It has to bring about action. And without that, it doesn't make sense, if you get my point. It is urgent that we bring about action. And it's great with dialogue, it's great with workshops, but it's also great to stop the pollution from our city's heating factories here in this municipality. And that should be a goal also when we talk about all the different issues. We have to prioritize where we can take action right now. Thank you.
Thank you, Sander. Wow. It really works. Teresa, you're next.
When you work, especially when you work with this agenda on your normal basis. So for me, it's all about we don't have a planet B. We need to look at the resources we have available for us as human beings, but also for the nature and also for our growth in the businesses. And I see a big potential in thinking more circular, because that's all about the donut economy. So it's great that we're going to have these discussions also during the budgets discussion starting up next week, because it's all about prioritizing. And we founded a climate foundation for more than 100 million Danish kroner 2 years ago, and now it seems like that we're getting more money into that, and I've been a part of that process and finding the resources, and now we need to take more action because the agenda needs us more than ever, and I think the COVID has delayed us a little in some of the actions, so it's really nice to have this conference setting the goal again and using the donut economy as a kind of a model, and I think we can bring more to life if we do it together, because it's everybody who needs to step up, from businesses to the municipality and the government, and also ourselves as persons or people have a huge impact on the changes we need to see in the future. So thank you so much for taking this on the agenda. I think it's the future we are looking into.
Thank you, Teresa. So over to Ture.
Okay, I'm from the Red Green Alliance. I'd also like to take the opportunity to thank for all the inputs here. I'll be specific on taking actions because you also presented us with 2 reports on Aarhus. And I think that we could start out by proposing to use and adopt the donut model in Aarhus. But to do what? To revise and improve the overall planning of Aarhus. We already have a lot of plans in place. The problem is how to implement them, how to monitor and follow up on them. And it is also how to then mainstream the donut model approach in these overall plans. Let me take one aspect, which is the housing policy and urban development. Here, the Red Green Alliance would like to put emphasis on enhancing citizens' participation and ownership to urban development and the green transformation of Aarhus. We do not just want to follow the developers. Was that the minute?
That was the minute.
Wow. I was told that I had 3 minutes, so I prepared 3 minutes. But
Tua, I'm sure we saved some time, and just keep your 2 minutes. I'm sure that you'll get to say what you want to say. But let's continue with Esben.
Thank you very much. Thank you for having me here. I'm quite new in this agenda. I had the papers and the documents last night from Kirsten, so it's a risk that I'm just speaking superficial thoughts and my comments is not really getting to the point. But I have to say that this, I think that I'm inspired with this framework because I think it offers a very comprehensive model for taking actions. In my daily life, working life, I'm in the middle of the donut, but this model explains the need to be both inside and outside. For Aarhus, I think this offers a possibility to get into this. We have a strong dialogue on development, city development, and I think this model offers a very good opportunity to make this dialogue more comprehensive. And I was inspired from Amsterdam about the regulation on the construction companies. I think it's a place to work on.
Thank you, Esben. Yeah. So, last in a row, Metin, please take it away. You have 1 minute for your initial thoughts.
The minutes you took from my time, I'll reduce my talk. My name is Metin Linde Eidin, and I come from the Social Liberals, Radikale Venstre, and I'm running for office in City Hall. I think it's really amazing to be part of a group working for change, and we need change, and we need it imminent. The speakers we've heard today have been truly inspiring and eye-opening. But academic talks, however inspiring they are, they need to become practical. So I hope we can move from academic discussions to practical solutions here in Aarhus. And I really believe we have to take action now, not waiting for technologies to save us. We have to find a balance between technology, lifestyles, and the sacrifices we have to undertake, sadly so. So that's my 45 seconds.
Thank you, Metin. So I'll just ask an initial question, and then you're free to throw your questions in. But actually, I would like to take up sort of the point on what several of you have said, and also I think where I stopped you to, that is getting into the concrete. Because I think there are two perspectives here that will be worth really going into. And one is sort of what are the actual challenges that we might address, not somehow speaking about frameworks, but maybe taking the logic of it and looking at where are we sort of struggling as a city to actually move into that direction that also in donut economy is the vision. That would be one thing. And the other thing is, what are the obstacles? Like what are the challenges we have in actually creating big frameworks? Because we have, on one hand, concrete problems we have to solve, and we also hear you say we don't have time for academic talk, we need action. On the other hand, we have ambitious goals, but as far as I see, we are lacking frameworks that can actually help us to know whether we're moving in the right direction. So either of these two questions, I would like you to actually share your thoughts on. So, and I see Teresa putting up her hand, and Tua.
Yeah. I think this is a really change for humanity. I think we're going into a new way of looking at the finances, for example. So we have to look at the three bottom lines: people, planet, profit. And that's a new way of acting. I just today had a meeting with the harbor of Aarhus, which is 80% of the harbor capacity in Denmark. And their mindset has shifted the last couple of years. But when I pushed them, we are a bit reluctant because it will cost us on the bottom line. And that's also the same for our city. So it's a change of mindset in terms of how we look at resources. And I think the donut model and the economy behind puts this quite on the spot. So from my point of view, it's really, it takes action. Just the last IPCC report we got last week in terms of the conditions Mother Earth are, suffering under. It's really urgent, and also especially from the bigger cities where we have the pollution, we have the challenges like mentioned on the paper. So we need to step up.
Yeah, Tua.
I think that we have two challenges that are crucial here. One is how to empower the citizens of Aarhus. Citizens' participation in Aarhus has run into a lot of obstacles and problems. So this is a challenge. How do we engage people? How do we give meaning to citizens' participation? We propose that addressing climate change, we could use a citizens' assembly like a klimaborgerting, sort of a mini of the one that we have at national level. And we could also use more mini citizens' assemblies like the one we've had on transport. And we could use participatory budgets to follow up. We need to really give citizens power. And then the other thing which is connected is how do we act on the warning from the UN climate panel? Well, the urgency. Well, we need to create a more sense of urgency, because in Aarhus, things are not that urgent. We have not even fully financed our Aarhus Climate Action Plan for 2021 to 2024. And I'm sad to say we need to enhance the ambitions of this plan. I might also tease the other participants here by saying that we're the only party that have submitted detailed budget proposal to finance all of the activities in the Climate Action Plan for the 2022 budget, which is not fully financed. We have made these budget proposals, and we're eager to share them with the other parties in the City Council. Yes, and I think we could also end on a remark that we have actually also submitted a budget proposal to take the first steps towards Aarhus as a donut city, so that for the 2022 budget, we could actually act on this if all the parties would agree. So that was an invitation, Yes, an invitation to a dialogue, and a very specific and action-minded dialogue.
And Mathilde, I saw you putting up your hand, and Sandra, so please, Mathilde.
Thank you. So I think when you're looking at the obstacles in Aarhus, I think you could also draw a perspective to some of the obstacles in Amsterdam, because I think a lot of young people, for example, now I'm young myself, so I'm allowed to speak for some young people, they feel like it's very expensive to live in Aarhus, and we are in the need of more housing and accommodation for young people. But of course, if you try to build more houses, you will create carbon dioxide, and it will be bad for our environment. But one solution maybe to talk into the donut economics, and also to suggest some solution, would be to create, for example, solar systems on top of every public buildings in Aarhus, for example. I think to answer your questions, that might be something you will be able to create a dialogue about, and create like different alliances towards very different parties. I think that, in my opinion, the donut model as a whole, I found it a bit bureaucratic. However, I'm sure that you can find some different, very ambitious climate initiatives that some of the different parties would be able to work together on.
Yeah.
Thank you, Mathilde. Thank you, Mathilde. And Sander.
Yeah, thanks. There's a lot of obstacles and challenges to be more climate friendly. There's legislation as a lawgivning and taxes, and there's technology, and then there's lack of investment. Legislation, an example, if you have a daycare, you can put solar panel powers on the roof. You can have your own circular electricity because you only use power a day. You still have to pay electricity tax for that. Although you are not buying anything, you have a sustainable system. You have to be taxed by that. Legislation, for instance, if we would like to have the builders to build more CO2 neutral, whatever, we can't do that because there's a national legislation that says we cannot do that. We can't bestemme. We can't decide what we want to build in our own city. We can't say that this building has to be this and this emission free or whatever. So there's a lot, and then we're missing the CO2 tax. I think it was great that the example in Amsterdam where they tax products and lower labor costs. That sounds like a great idea, but we can't do that either because Christiansborg is deciding everything. And they're also deciding where to invest. If we could invest more in sustainable energy, more windmill parks, then we would have electricity to make heat, for instance. It's the heat problem. The electricity is okay. We don't have to feel bad about that, but it's the heating. We're burning 3 pallets as a træpiller from Russia and Baltikum and the United States, and that's not sustainable. But we are marketing it in our Excel sheet as sustainable, but it's not. It's CO2 that's go right up into the air. And then there's the investment, like we are trying to experiment with geothermy, like we take heated water from underground. And maybe it works, maybe not. If it's not working, we're screwed, people. Because then we have to find other ways to be sustainable and CO2 neutral in 2030. So there's a lot of obstacles, and that's why I say action, because I'm actually angry. Because my party and other good people have tried to make these changes, but there's nothing happening really because of the legislation, lack of investment, technology. I'm sorry, I should stop now, but that's why I say action. And we have to work together in the new city council to not have visions, but also have actions, much more than today.
Yeah. Thank you, Sander. And also thank you for pointing out the limitations of power for the city council, but there are actually a lot of things you can affect, like for instance how we use space and stuff. So maybe it's also important also to make that visible to citizens. Where do we actually have influence here in our own city council, that we can all know that. Metin, you asked for the word. Actually, the sad thing is we only have 3 minutes left, and I also asked for questions from out here. I got one. So Metin, please do it short, and then we take we have 2 short questions. I think that's otherwise would be too ambitious. We take these 2. Metin.
Yes, I am as angry as Sander, really. We know many of the issues, and we know many of the answers. I think we politicians really need to grow some balls, because in the buildings, I'm an architect. In the building sector, we know that the carbon emissions, they come from concrete, they come from brick, and globally, transportation by plane, that's 3%, transportation via ships, 4%, but concrete takes up 8%. Why the hell are we using concrete the way we do? And we can change. We can actually demand that the new zoning plans in Aarhus, they demand change. We can insist on environmentally friendly areas in the city. Maybe we cannot heal the old city. It's already here, and the carbon has already been emitted. But new projects, we can demand that from developers. That's one thing. Also in the zoning plans, why aren't we thinking in biodiversity? Why not reserve 10% of all new developments for biodiversity? We already have 15% for housing reserved for green areas. Why not reserve an additional 10% for biodiversity? We know that insect life is dying off by 2% each year. We have to stop this. And I have to stop myself.
Thank you. Yes. So, let's shift quickly. Time is too short. I'm so sorry on behalf of everyone, but let's get a question in from the audience. Yeah. And please keep it short and ask a question.
My name is Finn.
Yeah.
Have we forgot that we are human beings, that we are going for dope and junk, we are going for what is pleasant, and we get lazy when we get a car. I just asked the mayor, Jakob Bundsgaard, what we'll do about it, that we are lazy, that we are going for what makes us happy. He will make more growth. And I also asked him, is it true what was in Aarhus Stiftstidende, that you will not change the behavior of the citizen in Aarhus? No, he has never said that. So, my question is, do we have to learn the children in Aarhus to say no to chocolate? I asked Thomas Medum, could that be
Finn, is that your question?
Could that be a thing in the schools in Aarhus, to say to not chocolate, so you can say no to driving car, flying, and eat meat? Say no to chocolate.
Does anyone want to answer that question from Finn?
Maybe not the specific, but I think it's amazing how much people have been willing to change the last 1.5 years due to Corona. And look how now we are back into our old habits, a lot of us. I think this is a reflection that I've been using a lot of time on, how much we were able to, also from a governmental level, to change, because there was this virus threat to humankind, but many more people globally die from climate change. That's kind of forgotten in the discussion, and I think we need to make this, in fact, I know we are sitting in a panel from different parties, but it's important that this maybe is not a political fight anymore. Yeah. We need to step up and make the change together, because I think a lot of us has maybe perspectives that are different, but the goal, I think a lot of us are in fact agreeing on. So if we could put our collective passion for action into the part, I think we will make a much more effective impact.
Okay, I think actually we have to end on that note. I think there was a lot of nodding and resonance out here. Sorry, we simply don't have time. And I also saw nodding here. Maybe not to interpret it, but it's time for coalitions maybe. Also in City Council, and I think you're good at it. Yes. So give a big hand to our panel. And please forgive us for not having enough time, and thank you for taking your time. And now it's over to the donor group that will share with us in 3 minutes how they are seeing themselves moving on from here. Yes, I think so.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Er den på? Det er godt. Ja. Goddag, jeg hedder Niels Sukker. Sorry, det skulle være engelsk. My name is Niels Sukker. I'm in the donor group.
Tæt op på munden.
Okay, thank you. And I liked this conversation. It was friendly. It was open. It was the start of something new. Not nagging, but discussing in a dialogue way, and I especially liked the parts about the greater balls with politicians. Nice. So what now? The next to do is we go to all the political parties. We discuss donut economies in details with them. What is it? What can it do? What can it do? What do you say? Why don't you like it if you don't like it? And so on, in details. So we know some barriers and things like that. And then we go to the city council and we say, what do you think? And we're listening. Very good. We'll also talk a little, but we're listening. Then we go to the citizens. We have to talk to the citizens, not only the organizations, the NGOs, all the usual stuff, the climate and the environment-friendly groups, but everybody, mainstream. We have to get all the people. We have to be many, and we have to make people understand that this is urgent. If we don't do this, then we don't survive. As simple as that. If you read this paper, the first chapter is about what are the situation. And this is not something we invented. It's climate change and climate science. You have to read 2 articles, then you know the situations. And it's very severe. And another point is very important. We have all the solutions. We already have them, so why the heck? Yes, I know why. They are here. You can read the solutions here. Please read them. It's 82 people from 60 organizations that have been using a year for writing this down. Then we'll go to the business, the small business, the great business. We'll go to them and to say, you have to be a part of this. If you're not a part of this, there will be no transformation. So how do we act together? How do we, change the production, the way of production that we are having now into something very green? As she said, Marieke Vandonk, she said, don't produce anything you can't repair. Don't produce anything with fossil oil, gas, and so on. Don't produce with resources from the third world when we can do it locally, and so on. And we have to go to the business to make them see this possibility. In a few years, there will only be sustainable business. All the other will be squeezed out. And then, that is in short what we'll do. And then we hope we can form a process where the citizens and the business and the municipality and the politicians form together groups and started designing Aarhus as a donut economy. In short, this is the plan. We hope you'll help us with it. Thank you.
Thank you, Niels. Thank you, Niels. And now actually we are so privileged that we will have Kate Raboth and Rob Shorter joining us again, and will share with us also some outlook on the work with donut economy in the C40 network, and help us with rounding off this day. So I hope you are still with us, Kate and Rob.
We certainly are still with you, and thank you. It's been fascinating hearing the conversation. Can I ask if I could share my screen one more time? I want to show you something extremely relevant. Yes, I want to, first of all, thank you all for speaking in English. It's a very humbling feeling to see a group of people who would much prefer to talk in their own language, but are speaking beautiful English for the sake of the two of us. We really appreciate it, and thank you. And I secondly want to say that I wish my city was full of local politicians and representatives who had these debates and had this ambition. So kudos to you for having this anger and frustration and desire to make the change happen. So I'm going to share three thoughts. Tua said, we have enough plans, we need action. And I absolutely agree. And we actually aiming to make the donut turn into a tool for action. I still can't share my screen. If it's possible, that would be wonderful. We are working with cities actually to turn this into a very practical tool for action. So I showed you the 4 lenses. What I didn't have the time to go on to share, I'm still not able to share my screen, is something that we call the powers to act. The powers to act that the city can actually, here we are. Thank you. Thank you so much, technician person. That's great. So very brief, I'm not doing a massive presentation. We need to think about the deep design of cities, because we've inherited cities that say, how can we make our city grow? And even here in some of the richest countries in the world, this is not the right question. We should be asking, how can we make our city thrive? And it is 5 deep design traits of every city that determines which way we are facing. The purpose. What is the purpose and the vision of the city? How is it networking with its residents, with its industries, and with other cities? How is it governed in terms of regulations, in terms of norms and culture and practice and metrics? How is city resources owned? Who owns the land and the housing? Who owns the data? Who owns the utilities? Who owns the enterprises? And how is that wealth reinvested in the city? And crucially, it's come up. How is the city financed, and what is that finance demanding? Now, we create what we call the Powers to Act framework, and we invite cities to say, which of these design traits, what's drawing us back into that old economy that we want to escape from? And what's already driving us forward? There are already some things in every city that are helping to bring about the transformation. But then Sander was making this great point that there are limits to what you can do in the city. There are some rules you can't change. So we need to put this in the broader context. There's the city, within the nation, within here in Europe, within the international community. And there are powers to act at all of these scales. So imagine if you were doing this in a workshop for your city, you would have post-it notes everywhere, what's drawing us back, what's bringing us forward, all these different levels. Then you can say, okay, now what can we do, stop doing now because it's within the power of this city? And there's a lot, as people have said. What can we start doing now because it's in the power of this city? And there's a lot. And what can we only do when we get together with other cities and other places that also want to bring about this transformation?
Kate, we're not seeing you. You're actually not sharing your screen if you're meant to
Oh,
do that.
no. Okay, I didn't share my screen. I will share a PDF of the slides.
Explained it beautifully.
I hope it will make sense. Okay, that was the first point I wanted to share. Second, and I really like that Sander was saying, you know, I'm angry, I'm frustrated. So there are many other cities in a very similar situation. And in fact, Amsterdam and Barcelona and Oslo and Glasgow and others are holding a conference called Cities for Change, a network of progressive cities predominantly in Europe. It's on the 14th and 15th of October. I am very happy to connect. They're inviting deputy mayors from different cities to have a very small, closed conversation about really making this happen. And they're using the framework I just described of the powers to act. I'll try and share one more time so you can just see the picture I was talking about. It'll all make sense now. There we are, the powers to act, okay? So they're going to use this exact same framework of purpose. What is our purpose? What are our networks? How are we governing ourselves? How are we owned? How are we financed? What's pulling us back or what's pivoting us forward? Examples from different cities and how they are each putting it into practice. So I will share the details of that because if somebody, deputy mayor or somebody from Aarhus wants to be part of that conversation, I think it's absolutely open. And then the last thing I want to say was to pick up on a beautiful comment that Teresa made. She said, to bring more to life, we will bring more to life if we do it together. And this is what we have learned from seeing the examples of cities and places internationally. One, it's when the municipality and the civic networks work together and have this much more deliberative democracy, the modern democracy. It's not only about voting, it's about the ongoing conversations, the ongoing engagement and sharing of decision-making and collaborative that Rob was showing about the Amsterdam approach, the bringing many stakeholders together. And two, creating this in an inclusive, open way that invites people in, that invites voices that aren't usually heard. I know I'm saying something that sounds familiar and obvious, and yet so often we don't manage to make it happen. The places that really have energy and momentum, bringing this tool into practice, we're seeing other places that are really getting this right. Lastly, there are many plans in your city, obviously, and there are many great plans. What this framework invites you to do is to put them into one place. So many of the policymakers in the workshops have said, it's a relief to come out of my silo, to see the whole picture, to recognize we're creating a whole. And that's what the framework invites. So let me stop there. Thank you so much for this chance to share back.
Kate's pretty much summed up everything I would say as well. Just to add one thing is that there's a group formed in Copenhagen around the ideas, and the city is exploring what it means to do the donut as well. So I think there's strength in solidarity both within Denmark, but also internationally, and looking to other European cities and how they're exploring the common challenges that you'll face as the city as well. So form these relationships and explore these common challenges together. That's the only thing I'm going to add to what Kate shared.
Oops. Kate and Rob, if you're still here, since we have about 2 minutes, I would love to just ask you a question, because we have gathered here a big group of really engaged citizens representing NGOs or just themselves. and politicians from city council or to be politicians in city council that all are here because they care about this vision, this agenda, and they really want to act, but to do it together. Could you give one last piece of advice, sort of directed at citizens? How can we actually behave? Like, how can we really understand our role of supporting this kind of change? And also to politicians. How can politicians really understand their role, like city councillors, with the sort of you could say, the amount of power that they can seize in that position? Could you give one specific piece of advice to both citizens and politicians being gathered here today?
I think Kate wants to speak. I think I've got the mic at the moment. Yeah. Well, the thing I'd say to citizens is that sometimes we believe we have a very limited economic role. And when we see the full picture of the economy and we see the roles we play, not only at work, but within the household, within the commons, as a citizen, we recognize there's so much agency that we can take, both individually, but also when we come together collectively. So my invitation would be to explore all the roles that you play within the economy. As for, I'm sure Kate's got some things she'd like to share. Okay. Yes, in terms of councillors, I don't have a huge amount of wisdom and I wouldn't want to profess to knowing anything more than you, so I'll leave it there.
Kate, is there anything you would like to share with us before we leave, if you're still there? Yeah. I think she left it to you, Rob.
Well, she can't talk. She just needs to be unmuted.
Okay.
If that's possible.
Yeah.
Thank you. Yes.
Yes,
I've had the real privilege of sitting in webinars with mayors, deputy mayors, councillors from all over the world. And, you know, there are some really progressive people, as we can hear, in the room, inside government, who really want to make change happen. And the ones who are just going for it, it's putting that ambition, saying it's clearly just now is the time. What are we waiting for? We've had this 6th IPCC report. Do we need some more information still? Do we need more disasters in the world? And breaking through and just starting to do it, change is always hardest just before we make it. And once you start, as you could hear in everything Marieke was saying, they introduced this very ambitious circular economy legislation, and the industry lobbies, the construction industry lobby to stop it, and they introduce it. And the next thing, the construction industry is saying, oh, now we've mastered these regulations. We are at the forefront of the circular economy in our country, in Europe, in the world. We have skills that other people need. So change is always harder just before we make it. And when we've made it, we so quickly look back and think, why did that take us so long? Because it feels so much better to be on the other side of this. So I've seen cities and people make that leap. And I really can feel it in the air, in the conversation in the room. You guys are about to make that leap. If the donut is a useful tool, fantastic. There are many useful tools. If it is, we'll be on that journey with you. Thank you.
Thank you very much. And thanks to all of you for being here and for sort of investing this time and energy. If suddenly you are inspired and you want to do more, I've been told by the donor group that they would love some more support, so you can reach out. They need heads and hearts and hands to create this movement. Another thing you can do is that if you haven't decided yet on November, you can vote for all of those. See? And then hold them accountable afterwards and support them in making that change. And obviously, I think we should just say thank you for the work that has been done, that we could start this conversation, and we should not leave it with that, but actually see it as a beginning for at least using this new knowledge to really bring this movement forward and really creating the change here in Aarhus. So thank you all very much. Mm-hmm.